vitamin D is a very powerful steroid hormone that our body produces in response to sun exposure. So the sunlight that is touching our skin, that is entering our skin in the form of UV radiation, that means UVB and UVA primarily. The UVB rays stimulate the production of vitamin D, and the UVA rays make sure that we don't produce too much of it, and so UVA is primarily in charge of removing any excess vitamin D in the body. Vitamin D is, if it's ingested, can be very toxic. In fact, if you ingest too much of it, it can cause damage to the liver and it can actually kill you. So it's important to make a differentiation between supplemental vitamin D and the vitamin D that is produced in response to sunlight. And I always prefer the second option, because you are assured by the sun exposure that you will never ever overdose on vitamin D. And the importance here is that vitamin D is produced to a point that it can keep your immune system in check. It keeps it balanced. That means it's not aggressive, it's not overreactive, and it's not underreactive. That means you will always be in a place where the body is capable of purifying itself, cleansing itself, without the requirement for external stimulation such as viral material that could also lead to an internal purification if vitamin D levels are in fact low, which typically happens during the winter months when people don't get enough sun exposure. Those who have not received enough vitamin D or have not recharged their vitamin D batteries, so to say, during the summer months, they are particularly prone to develop things like the flu or colds or other viral or bacterial infections. Vitamin D controls about 20,000 genes in the body, and especially those that are responsible for keeping our body free of infection and free of any harm or contamination. So vitamin D is such a powerful hormone that unfortunately it is not given the credence and the importance, the value that it has in our physiology, in our body, in our in the functions of all the different organs and systems that are supposed to keep us balanced and healthy. Now, when vitamin D levels drop, you can gradually, as this happens from year to year, increase the risk of developing cancer, heart disease, osteoporosis, and many other ailments such as multiple sclerosis, which are very, very high comparatively or relatively to in northern states or colder countries compared with the states or countries nearer to the equator. So that's where people would have more sun exposure, and the incidence of multiple sclerosis and cancer and heart disease and all these other chronic illnesses are much lower in those countries that have a higher sun exposure, or where people are more outdoors, living more outdoors than they live indoors. So we have a direct connection between vitamin D levels and many of the ailments that people suffer from, and it's particularly important for people living in a northern state to find ways to replenish their vitamin D. Now, if sun exposure is not sufficient during the winter month, then I suggest either to travel to a warmer country if you can, at least to break up the winter, go to Florida or Costa Rica or some other places that have plenty of sunshine during our winter months, or if that is not possible for you to acquire, then a vitamin D lamp or UV lamp that would help you to keep your vitamin D levels at the level that is required for the body to have a strong, healthy immune system and to prevent any infectious illnesses to occur. Having said that, even in places where the sun shines in the northern hemisphere, you will not necessarily get enough vitamin D from that during the winter months. You can verify whether you are getting enough or not by standing in the sunlight, and if the shadow of your body is longer than the body height, so in other words, if you look down and the shadow has a greater length than your body height, then you're not getting vitamin D. If you are even during the midday period, seeing that your shadow is longer than your body height, again, you don't make vitamin D. In that case, it would be best to use a vitamin D lamp or UV lamp. Dr. Mercola has some standing lamps which are pretty much effective in restoring vitamin D levels. There are smaller lights that you just look at. Make sure that you expose at least the upper part of the body or a large part of the body to these UV rays so that you do produce enough vitamin D.